President Trump is dismissing alleged intelligence related to an apparent bounty placed by Russia on U.S. soldiers. This morning, the president called the story fake news and a hoax. He accuses the New York Times, which first reported on the intel, of trying to hurt Republicans. U.S. intelligence agencies believe Russia offered to pay Taliban-backed militants to attack and kill American soldiers in Afghanistan. Multiple reports say the president knew as early as February about the threat. At a briefing today, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo praised the intelligence community's handling of the bounty information. He says they did so seriously and appropriately. Pompeo also blamed Congress for not taking action.
The fact that the Russians are engaged in Afghanistan in a way that's adverse to the United States is nothing new. By the way, some members of Congress are out there today suggesting that they are shocked and appalled by this. They saw the same intelligence that we saw. So it would be interesting to ask them what they did when they saw whatever intelligence is that they are referring to.
White House officials will brief top congressional leaders known as the Gang of Eight tomorrow on the intelligence. As CBS News White House correspondent Ben Tracy reports, the Trump administration is facing mounting pressure for answers on the threats U.S. soldiers face and when the president learned of them.
This damages our ability as a nation to collect intelligence.
White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany railed against what she called targeted leaks, but did not deny there is intelligence indicating the Russians offered bounties to attack U.S. troops. Sources tell CBS News that information was not verbally told to President Trump, but that it was in his classified daily brief. The White House disputed reports that he doesn't read it.
The president does read, and he also consumes intelligence verbally. This president, I'll tell you, is the most informed person on planet Earth when it comes to the threats that we face.
But for days, the White House has claimed the president was completely unaware of the Russia allegations because U.S. intelligence agencies had not reached a consensus. On Tuesday, former Vice President Joe Biden said there's no excuse for President Trump not knowing.
The presidential daily brief is something I read every single day as vice president. The president read it every day. The idea that somehow he didn't know or isn't being briefed, it is a dereliction of duty.
President Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton, who is promoting his scathing new book about the president, says he understands why President Trump may have been uninformed.
The president doesn't much like being briefed. He thinks he knows what he needs to know.
Democrats briefed by the White House question why the president has not promised to get to the bottom of the allegations.
The president called this a hoax publicly. Nothing in the briefing that we have just received led me to believe it is a hoax.
Republicans also want to hear more.
Any targeting of U.S. forces by Russians, by anyone else, will face a very swift and deadly response.
And CBS News intelligence and national security reporter Olivia Gazis joins me now from Washington. Hi, Olivia. So what information has the White House been willing to share with Congress, and what do we know about these briefings?
Sure, Tanya. So the White House has engaged lawmakers in a few ways so far this week. We know to date a select group of lawmakers, Republicans first and then Democrats, were invited into the White House for a classified briefing delivered by, among others, the Director of National Intelligence, the White House Chief of Staff, the National Security Advisor, and again, some experts from the National Security Council. Today, we know that the Director of National Intelligence will meet with the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, and tomorrow, the Gang of Eight, the sort of top echelon of lawmakers who receive the most sensitive intelligence, will also receive a briefing on this issue. As Ben just recapped for us there, members of both parties have been demanding more information. They're concerned about the activities that Russia appears to have been engaging in on this front, and it remains to be seen what else happens. There seems to be little appetite for an all-member briefing on either the House or the Senate side, but select committees on the defense and intelligence front have asked to hear more from the agencies who are making these judgments and from the military leaders who were informed of them too.
And Olivia, the White House is sticking to its story that the president was not verbally briefed months ago on this intelligence, but has now been fully briefed. National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien justified the delay earlier today. Let's listen to what he said.
But let me tell you one thing. The person who decided early on whether the president should be briefed on this in the Oval intelligence briefing was his senior career civil servant, a CIA officer. And she made that decision because she didn't have confidence in the intelligence that came up. We get raw intelligence and tactical intelligence every day. Hundreds of pieces of intelligence come in every day. Thousands of pieces of intelligence come in a week. She made that call. And you know what? I think she made the right call. And so I'm not going to criticize her. And knowing the facts that I know now, I stand behind that call. Now, unfortunately, as I mentioned before, because someone decided to leak this intelligence while we were trying to get to the bottom of it, that may never be possible now.
So, Olivia, if you will, explain for our viewers how these daily intelligence briefings work and how finished, quote unquote, does intelligence need to be for the president to receive it, and who has to make that call?
Sure. And the first thing I'll say about the National Security Advisor's comments there is that it is true. It is that in the primary discretion belongs to the top senior CIA briefer that is delivering elements of the president's daily brief to the president. It is a difficult choice, as always, as to what to pack into a given session. But we know that if it was included as a written item, it was at least up for consideration as something that the president should be informed about. The thing that I'll say about his comments further, though, is that it would be hard for him to criticize that decision, considering he is presumably among the many officials, the small universe, but several officials who receive the written version of the PDB and who often are in the room with the president alongside that briefer. It's not just a one-on-one, the president and the briefer. It more often than not includes the director of national intelligence, sometimes has included the director of the CIA, includes often the national security advisor, includes, again, other senior aides and subject matter experts that may be briefing on any one issue on any given day. It's also not a one-off touch point, right? It is a daily brief that the president determines how often he wants to receive. And so in this president's case, it's usually a handful of times a week. So I would say that, you know, to accept the decision that the briefer made is one that kind of necessarily happened, because at any one point, any one other senior official could have said, actually, we need to escalate this and make sure that the president is aware and this is on that radar. And, you know, the National Security Advisor, who has daily access to the president, might have at any point made that choice. Second, I'll just quickly observe that that this is not the first time that the administration has pointed to a briefer to explain either a course of action or inaction on the part of the president and the administration. We already heard about this in the case of the coronavirus, that the president was briefed for the first time in late January, and at that briefing, senior intelligence officials indicated that the briefer said, you know, this virus was not very deadly. But again, this is not a sort of one-shot opportunity. These conversations happen multiple times a week. Topics can be revisited. Intelligence is collected. It's refined. So, you know, these are conversations that the national security apparatus is having more broadly with the president, and not just the sole, if important, discretion of one briefer.
So, Olivia, do you believe then there truly was conflict within the intelligence community about the credibility of these bounty allegations?
So that is what the White House has put forward, again, as an explanation as to why the president may not have been briefed on this, that there was, quote, no consensus among the intelligence agencies, and that it was unverified intelligence. I'll just say there that, you know, consensus and verified, those terms don't have a whole lot of currency within the intelligence community itself. Consensus is rare. Dissent is common in the intelligence community, because every agency, especially when an item is being inserted into the president's daily brief, has a chance to weigh in and put what on the table, what it has collected on a given topic. So to say that there was dissent within the community, which we have had indications that in this case the National Security Agency dissented from what a view that the CIA may have been putting forward. That's normal, that's common. That doesn't mean that intelligence is verified or unverified. It just means that it's an evolving threat picture that collection continues on. So if the president and the administration were expecting to receive only 100% verified intelligence, they wouldn't receive a lot at all. That's just not the way that collection, assessments, and attribution work.
And then considering the seriousness of this intel, the allegations of bounties being placed on U.S. troops, wouldn't it at the very least have gone to the Secretary of State?
So I think the secretary addressed a little bit of what he might have known. He sort of downplayed this, saying, we know a whole lot about Russia's malign behavior in the region. They've been doing it for years. It's an open question as to whether this was actually an escalation on their part or not. That is a debatable thing. The fact of a bounty, I would say, is a pretty material development and one that you might want to raise with the leadership of Russia, even if you don't think that people who want to kill American and coalition troops need much incentive in the form of a bounty to go ahead and do that. Also because it informs your policy posture towards Russia, right? So not only is the Secretary of State engaging with Russian counterparts, the president, we already know, has had several conversations with the president of Russia on this front. Would he have offered Russia a chance to rejoin the G7 if he had known this? Would he have made other joint statements with Putin if he had known this? It is an open question as to the policy implications as to what putting this intelligence on the president's radar might have done.
Absolutely. Lots of questions still to be answered there. Olivia Gazis, thank you so much for sharing your insight with us.